I would say the easiest part about writing fantasy is writing the initial draft. Like I think it's super fun. Like you're writing things that are like enjoyable to you. Like if you're like that's not very fun, like your character's probably not going to do it, you know. And I liked how I write. There's a couple of different methods to writing fantasy or fiction. One is to like storyboard your character out. Like this is the, like scene by scene. Okay, like that's one method. The other method's called like gardening, where like you have your character, you plant them, and you like prune them as they grow. And that's the way I like it. So, like ultimately, whenever I like storyboard mine, I'll like write out the hero's journey if I'm gonna do that route, and I'll be like, all right, here's these significant events that have to happen in this book to have continuity through like the flow of the book and like the story, and to like to feel satisfied at the end of reading it.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Alliance Writers Collective. We are a rooted movement with inspired writing. We're more inspired together. The goal of Alliance Writers Collective is to gather Alliance writers from the Christian Missionary Alliance, to highlight them as authors and to give them a chance to speak about what they are working on, what they have written, what they plan on writing. And we are excited to have Wes Sherry with us for this interview. Wes is a church planter in the Christian and Missionary Alliance in the Western Pennsylvania district. He's been a pastor for a long time. He's got a wonderful family, his wife Sarah and their kids. We are just blessed to have them in our district. It's the district that I'm in, and he's a fantasy author. It's been great to see, Wes jump into his giftings and work on the portions of writing that he feels led to do. So welcome, Wes. If you want to share a little bit about yourself, and then we will jump into the interview with you. And you are the first author who has done fiction or fantasy. So this is a new launch into a new step for us as Alliance Writers Collective, because it's not just about Christian poetry. It's not just about church books. It's not just about preaching books. It's also gathering all of our writers together and hearing their creative works in the Alliance. So welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Marv. Yeah, so just like you said about me, like Sarah and I and my two boys, we live in East McKeesport. We do church planting. We also run a community center here. We call it Church Planting Through Community Center. Ironically, it's Gospel Collective and Community Collective are the names. So it's just fitting that I'm on the Writers Collective here. So just feel right at home. So in that, yeah, we are just like seeking how we can meet community needs and just share Jesus' love through that. We have a couple sayings we like church to the churchless. So where can we take the church that doesn't exist, that it doesn't fit in? And we also, I like the term, like, how can I be the pastor to the pastorless? So like, if something happens for somebody and like, there's no one else to go visit, like, am I that person that's going to be there for them? So yeah, like we just have come around people who, don't really like the church or aren't interested in it. And God's just like had some grace and been meeting people. It's just been cool to see that. One of my other favorite things we like to say is like, we want to smell like Jesus. So like if Jesus was alive today, well, if he was walking around today, like how would he smell? Like would he smell like the people that he's hanging out with, really? Like you think about, you go to somebody's home, you go to different restaurants for different foods, like you come out, you kind of smell like that restaurant. And we're like, all right, where would Jesus be hanging out? And how can we smell like him today? So yeah, as we are pursuing church planting here in Western PA, which I just want to plug, like it's great. Like Western PA is awesome, and more people should come here because it is a phenomenal district to work in. And even just as we see like the gospel moving forward, and just like how God's meeting people and just like the testimony he's giving the church here has just been really cool to see. So yeah, so I do write fiction, and looking forward to getting into that today. And yeah, that's kind of about me, a little bit of what we're doing here at Eastern McKeesport.
Hey, well, thanks for that. Again, this is our first foray into this genre. You wrote a book, The Hero of the Fallen, and I've read the book. I told you it took me 2.5 days to read it. It was so engaging. I was right there with Will and Sihu. I think that's how you pronounce her name, right? Sihu.
I think so.
Um, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's an excellent, excellent book that you have written in a fiction slash fantasy type of novel, and it's a great fantasy book with a deeper meaning. I think, as I've read through it, I think there's definitely some deeper meanings to what you are writing. Can you tell us about the inspiration for the book and kind of the writing process that you took for writing The Hero of the Fallen?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like I said, this is the first book I ever wrote. And really what happened was I was looking around for a book that I wanted to read, and I just didn't find any that like were engaging or interesting to me. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna start writing a story.
Mm,
So I started writing the story, and I got like, and I would just like do it when I came home from work. At that, like at this point, I was working like IT work at a factory in my hometown, and I was just like, yeah, just like so I would just like start writing and just like where's the story going? Like I didn't even know. So I was just
mm,
like, is this enjoyable to me? Essentially, I was just creating a character and letting them and like giving them like challenges to overcome. And I got to like chapter 10 and I was like, oh man, I actually need to figure out where this book's going. So I did some research and I found out like George Lucas, whenever he wrote Star Wars, I was like, what did he use? He used a book. It's by Joseph Campbell called Hero of a Thousand Faces. And I was like, I bought the book and I like speed read it. And I was like, okay, we're gonna like do the hero's journey, I guess. I had no idea that was a thing. Like if people have done any like writing classes, like usually you'll approach that and find out some similarities that happen in most stories. Um, but yeah, so I jumped into that, read that, kind of storyboarded it out, like in a really like vague and broad sense. And then I also like decided like, hey, I don't want this to be a book that I describe like every branch and every tree. It's a very like story driven book. Like the
mhm.
it's gonna flow fast. And like I said, you could read both like so the next book coming out, but you can read them both in like a few days. You know, I mean like it just reads really quickly, which is something I wanted. Like I just wanted it to be something that like people could enjoy. And like I said, I chose to focus on the story aspect. Like I think there is like I have read and do read like books that are like really descriptive and focus on like the world building. But like I said, this one's primarily focused on like the plot that drives it. So that's just like that how that works. But yeah, so I just kind of jumped in to answer the question and go back to it is just wanted to see what I could do and just make something entertaining for myself. And then I just found out that I like eventually would start like passing it off to like my sister. Like I love her because I was like, what do you think of this? She's like, oh, this is pretty good. I'm like, all right, cool. I feel like it's not garbage. I can keep writing. And she'd get like 2/3 through. I'm like, give me your feedback on this. So that's kind of like how that book developed. And just like even some of like it was really fun for me because the first like time writing is a time like where you're really drawing on a lot of your real world experiences
Mhm, mhm.
and like even like the details uh like I can think back and I would actually like send it to my siblings because like there's details like about our own grandpa, like a story that he was involved with, and there's a guy in there that's like older, like actually probably looks a lot like my grandpa who's not around anymore. But like my sister was reading it, she's like, I knew exactly where you pulled this from. Now, like that's not to say like that's how it continued, but like that was just like a fun aspect to like the start of it, is to be able to sneak some things in like that and like little like Easter eggs for just for myself or for the family. But beyond that, like it just like continued to build and develop, and it really outgrew those really like intricate little things into something that I thought was a lot better in terms of just like instead of being like a really niche like just for me book, it turned into a book that I think a lot of people can enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I enjoyed it, and you had said it was about 70,000 words, which most fantasy books end up being closer to 100,000 words
Yeah.
because there's that world building and all kinds of description. You did not take the Tom Clancy take, and where you wrote 10 pages about a gun describing exactly what it looks like and
Yeah.
all the things that go into it, which I did appreciate because it was a quicker read and you could follow the characters. You know, you added characters as you went on, but each character had a good description and understanding of who they were, their attitude, their willingness to go on this hero's journey. You know, I specifically think of Will and Sihu, who's are the two main characters that end up in the book. But as I was reading it, like I said, it felt like there was a deeper meaning, as if there was some purposeful allegory that was written into the story. Now, maybe because I know you and you're a pastor, that could just be me reading into it. But was there a purposeful allegory in the story? And if so, without giving away the store on the story, what was the purposeful allegory that you placed within it?
Yeah. So yeah, so when it comes to like allegory and things like that, like I think like it's an interesting line. And like the purpose as like writing as a Christian author, in a genre that's like I said, this book is not like considered a Christian book and like in that genre. But it's written by a Christian, you know, and it's written
Mm-hmm.
from my experiences and like relationships with God, and like that influences like how I write a story, or how like a character would relate to like a divine being, or some capacity like that. Back to allegory and things like that. So like I think it's kind of like the debate that you have between like Tolkien and Lewis whenever you have like the Chronicles of Narnia and you have Lord of the Rings. And one is like so clearly allegorical, like C.S. Lewis, uh like like 100% so clear. But then you have like Lord of the Rings where uh and like Tolkien does write on this, like what is the benefit of like fairy stories as he calls them. And essentially like the idea of good winning out is just like a principle that like is really like a healthy moralistic principle that we can look to. Um like so like even the point, like my favorite Easter message I ever heard, the guy that was sharing it, he actually used Lord of the Rings as like he used like Frodo as the hero we needed versus like Aragorn as the hero we wanted, as
Mm-hmm.
Jesus and you know as a servant, you know. So I don't know, I just think that's cool. But yeah, all that to say is, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a direct allegorical like application to like the Jesus story, but I would say that it does emphasize the transcendent experience that most people look for and are pursuing. Like I don't know, like you know, for example, like when people like get high and listen to Led Zeppelin, like I'd rather them read this book and like what else is out there, you know, you
Yeah,
know. So,
yeah, yeah.
so like it's um so that's more where it's related. Now like that being said, like I pull from like my experience, like some of the names you could see are influenced by uh like like rooted, I would say rooted in like some scriptural names that you could pull out. But all in all, like I feel like that's more of an Easter egg for Christian readers reading it. Like you're not going to
Mm-hmm.
miss anything if you like don't know this part of it. But like I said, if you have like been going to church and been educated or read your Bible, like you're like, oh, well, that's neat. Like it's like those little things you find. Just it's kind of that idea of uh you know, if your plumber is Christian, is he just a plumber who's Christian, or is he a Christian plumber? Like you can make
Mm-hmm.
the call there. But like I said, specifically in this genre, when I wrote this, it was not intended for Christian audiences only, but I wanted it to be able to appeal to both.
Yeah. I mean, so my perception of how your faith was invading this story
Yeah.
is when you look at the emperor and the eternal
Yeah.
king, you know, Satan and God, and then the Valken and the Ilkin, which really were reminiscent of angels and fallen angels, you know. So to me, it was just a really cool, and again, maybe that's just because I am Christian, reading it with a Christian lens. But seeing those kind of wrap into that was kind of cool for me. And I said it might be me reading with those colored glasses, knowing that you're a Christian. But you know what's interesting about Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, you probably know this, is they argued about the
Yeah.
allegorical issues. And Tolkien swore up and down, mine is not an allegory. Yours is obviously an allegory. But I mean, you can't help but understand the Christian mindset and say, Tolkien, whether you did it on purpose or not, there's
Yeah. Yeah.
allegorical views within what you're writing. You can't help but have your faith shape your writing, and you described that really well. Um, you know, so you said you just got home from work and started writing it. What draws you to the fantasy genre? What types of authors have you read? Because as I read it, I saw pieces of different fantasy. I love fantasy, so this was a blast for me. I saw different pieces of some types of different fantasy novels that I had read. So, who do you read? Why do you like this genre so much?
Yeah. So like, uh, man, I just love the fantasy genre, honestly. Like the world that it's built into. So like all time, like I just love Lord of the Rings. Okay, like uh, when we had like the Rings of Power series was coming out on Amazon, we'd have our neighbors over every Friday night and have a watch party. Like
Yes,
me and Sarah, whenever we got married, like 10 years ago, I bought the like extended editions of Lord of the Rings,
it's
and
the only
every
way to watch it.
yeah,
It's
there's
the
no
only
other
way to
way.
watch it.
And every year we would like take a break from watching The Office and we would watch through the Lord of the Rings extended editions. And like, it's just been part of like even now, if you come to my living room, below my TV is all my Lord of the Rings books, like the bookends that you would get at the extended. Like it's so I just love it. Yeah, so like hugely influenced by I would say like Tolkien. I would say even by Peter Jackson and his like depiction of it, also really
Mm,
influenced just like how I view world building in that. Um, in that, like also like I think one of the best authors like nowadays in fantasy is Brandon Sanderson.
hmm.
Yeah, like guy's just crazy when it comes to writing, but in a positive way. Like his
Yeah,
out
yeah.
stream. Um, he writes ridiculous amount. Um, and I think like his like story building and world building, like he actually has a class that's for free. You can go and watch it on the BYU channel. Like, and he teaches like a creative writing class, talks about how to write fantasy. So I've watched some of that. But yeah, so I would say like for this genre, it's just because I love it. That being said, like so Brandon Sanderson, one of my favorite authors, like arguably one of the best authors alive at this point.
Hmm.
Um, he wrote a sci-fi series, and I read the first book of it, and I was like, man, this is a really good series, and it's like really well written. It's a really great story. I was like, who would love this? My dad, who's a Trekkie. So I sent it over to
Mm.
him, and I just stopped reading that series because I'm like, I don't have a ton of time to read. So what I do read, I want to really enjoy. It's like I just like love like the sword aspect and like the magic aspect side of it. Like it's not like advanced weaponry or anything like that, or
Hmm.
uh, like I don't even know what kind of spaceships, like what kind of engines they would have if I was to write that series or something like that. But it's just like it doesn't like it just fits me better. Like I said, if it's something like I want to be able to take a break and read something, that's what I like to read. So that being said, like, there's some other like modern modern authors as well that aren't in the Christian genre. Like Brandon Sanderson is not in the Christian genre either. But there's some modern ones. Like I read some like Viking stuff. I read some ones that take place in the fantasy world as well. So like just like I kind of try and spread it around, and I try not to uh like focus specifically on reading fantasy, but it's what I enjoy the most. So like if I'm gonna like drive somewhere and I want to listen, like that's what I'll listen to, or if I'll read. That being said, like I do like to read biographies as well.
Mm.
Love reading historical biographies, and like currently, I'm reading. Yeah, I guess I'm reading. It's called Empire of the Summer Moon. It's like the last of the Comanches on the plains, and they're like fighting against the U.S. Army. So yeah, like I do like to read widely, because I also feel like that will give you more information to draw on, a better understanding of how things work in warfare. If you're writing about warfare or fight scenes, or like what's the expectation of like a battlefield. Like I read a biography in the Civil War. I'm like horrified by all the stuff that's happening, and it's like, well, I can draw on that later on, be like, oh, what's war actually like in terms of hand-to-hand combat? I don't know, like you just draw from everything. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I just like fantasy. There's there is a series that I really like, and it's a satire of fantasy. It's called Orconomics, which I think is hilarious. And it mixes this is like where it's fun to write fantasy, because you just mix two things. So they mix like the housing fall of 2008 with a fantasy world. You're like, how does this work? And it does. Like, I don't know. Like, I've listened to it like 3 or 4 times, and it just cracks me up every time I listen to it. So
That's hilarious. I mean,
yeah,
I swear, Wes, you are describing me when you talk about what you read, with the exception of kind of the war books. Yeah, I mean, I love fantasy. I'm almost done with the 7-book Mistborn series,
oh yeah,
which
so
Sanderson wrote on a. He said he purposely wrote it quicker. It's still long, but he
yeah,
wrote it with a quicker pace because people were really kind of just slogging through some of his other books. Like, he helped write some of the Wheel of Time to finish those off, and those are, my gosh, those are a slog. But yeah, I mean, I watched the Rings of Power, and if you read the Silmarillion, like
yeah, yeah,
you're like, okay, this is real Tolkien stuff. Other people are like, well, how does this follow anything? You're like, well, go read the Silmarillion, and
yes,
it all makes sense to you, because they're all kind of grumpy that it's not the way that they thought it would be, but it's fantastic. I like to read Christopher Paolini. Have you read any of his stuff?
oh yeah, yep.
Okay, I'm a
It's
huge
a new book.
Eragon fan. I did. I read it already, man.
I haven't read it yet, but I
It's
have
so good.
read and reread his last set. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's so good. I'm kind of a nerd that way, but he wrote a sci-fi series. I read the first like 4 chapters and was like, I don't like this.
yeah,
I'm not going to read this. But that's me. I like fantasy as well. So I read biographies. I don't know. Anyways, it's not about me. This is about Wes Sherry. But I'm just saying, I feel like you were describing me while you're talking about what you read.
yeah,
So you've called this the Redemption series. Originally, it was going to be a trilogy. Now
right,
it's a duology,
yeah.
and you
I don't
are
think that's the
about.
word. I think I made it up.
I know. I mean, it could be a
Sounds
series.
right.
It could be a cycle.
Yeah,
Whatever you
yeah,
want to call it. I think duology works.
yeah.
There's two things, but the second book is about to be released. You said somewhere around February 1st. Can
Yeah.
you tell us about the next book? Does it end the series, or is there more coming? And are there more projects in this specific genre? You talked about other
Yeah.
genres that you're looking to, but tell us about the second book and how it connects to the first, and does it end everything?
Yeah. So it is, like I said, it's the second book of a series. And originally when I started this all, I was like, man, I'm gonna publish my first book. Like, I didn't even decide it was a trilogy until like I went to publish, and I was like, I need to select trilogy or like just figure out how many books it's gonna be, because I wanted to put like the subtitle on the book. And I was like, yeah, we'll make it a trilogy. And then like as we got into it, like life just like started to compound for me and just get busier and busier. And then it ended up like I was planning on releasing the next book like the following year, and then the third book. And I was like, I just felt so bad, because I was like, people, like, I hate being the reader who's waiting years for the next book to come out. So essentially what I did, I was like, and then the next book comes out, and then they're like, but actually it's not going to end there. We're going to go another book. And that happens like 5 times, and you're like 15 years into your life reading a series. So I was like, you know what, we're not going to do that. We're gonna write the second book. We're gonna like complete the story. And that's essentially what I did. Like, this is the second book of the series, and that's the end of the series. Just like, in a sense, I'm like doing the opposite of what authors do to make money. Like, their goal is
Mm-hmm.
usually in the fantasy genre to write like, it's really common to have a book like 70 to 100,000 words, and they'll just release one every year or every other year, and that just becomes like, it's just money making thing and a story that never ends. And I'm like, dude, I don't want to do that. Like, the point of this for me is not to make money. It's to just like, for me to like, it's beneficial for me, for a reader. It's just like something I enjoy doing, and I want people to enjoy reading the books that I write. So we're just gonna finish up the series here. Like, I did like in my head, I was just like, yeah, but I could have a 2.5, and I was like, we'll see. But like I said, if you read the second book, like you're gonna find like the loose ends are tied up. It's gonna feel good. Like I did have, I've had a couple people read it, and they've agreed like they're just like happy with like the continuity of the story. There's some things that were introduced at the end of the first book that are picked up and given life, and you can see how that plays out. And just one of the things that I enjoyed about the second book and the first book is just interesting because like it kind of starts as an outcast society trying to like make their way through a culture that already exists. What I had to do in the second book was to develop that world a little bit more, and you're going to see some of the cultures and customs and religion and things that took place. Yeah, and just like I think I'm a funny writer. Other people, I don't think I'm very funny in terms of jokes. Like I used to start all my sermons with a joke that nobody laughed at, and I was like, it's fine. I don't do that anymore, but in my own mind, I think I'm funny, and that's what I always ask people. I'm like, whenever they like read the book, I'm like, what do you think of that scene that I thought I wrote that was really funny? And that goes, it's okay. It's like I smiled. I'm like, like I was like laughing when I wrote it, but yeah. So like I said, it is a continuity of the old story. Like the first book leaves off with kind of I try to tie up some things in the first book, but also leave some like cliffhangers out there to be completed. And it really was setting up whether or not it would go to 2 or 3 books. And like I said, I was able to wrap it up in the second book, and I believe I did it well. And like I had somebody last week, he read through both books because he read the first book like a couple months ago and he really liked it. I was like, all right, well, hey, give me your feedback on the second book. So he read through the first book again and into the second one. So you kind of see the continuity, which I really appreciated on him, because like that's one of the things like you worry about as an author releasing books like years apart is like, man, what did I forget? Like when I wrote that book, I was just in a completely different place in life. Like, all the stuff that's going on. And like, yeah, even as I look back to some of the things I've written, I'm like, wow, like I forgot about that. Or like I'll look back and like, man, that was really good, like surprise myself, but it happens. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not giving away like much, but I will say this, like we do have the continuity of like Will and Sihu and Rains come back up in the new story. And then as well as 2 new characters that were alluded to in the previous one that just gets that all tied together.
Yeah.
It's not like I think I do good enough at not being like too many perspectives. So to try and like narrow that down. I don't really like I have probably 4 or 5 perspectives in this book, but they're following like 2 or 3 storylines. So that's what I think keeps it tied together.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, I think Rick Riordan sometimes adds too many characters in. The Percy Jackson series was good, and then he does a whole nother book series, and you're like, wait, there's like 5 new characters, and all the 5 were there. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so confusing. So I did appreciate that about the book. And when you let me have an early release look, and I'm about 9 chapters in to the book, which I mean, I loved reading it. And what was great was the Somem, who was previously foreshadowed.
Yeah.
I didn't think much about him because he didn't show up at all. And then, the opening of the book is about him. I'm like, oh, he was there. I see how this is all connected. So no, I really, really appreciate it. I'm loving it so far. Appreciate you letting me get an early copy of that. And, when the book comes out, everybody, seriously, you need to get both books and you need to read them. They are excellent, excellent books, and I love your writing, Wes. So this is a different genre, as we've mentioned a couple times than what we've had before. We all know that writing, as new writers, new authors, not authors who have broken through, writing is not about money for us. It's about the creative juices flowing. It's about sharing what's on our heart. I like how you said, if no one really reads it, was it worth it? And every book that I've written, I know Justin and Jim, who are also on the Alliance Writers Collective leadership team, if nobody else read those books, they still would have written them, and I would have written mine for the same purpose. But because this is different, we've talked about editing nonfiction, Christian leadership books, and all kinds of different ideas of Christian books. How is the editing for this? You know, when you look at your writing, I don't even know how to begin to think about editing. You know, I have written about 17,000 words in 4 different books. Most of them are fantasy. Right now, I'm trying my hand at a CIA thriller, which is just because I love to write, just trying to get these ideas out. So, how do you edit a fantasy book, and who edited yours?
Yeah, so for me, it's kind of a, like I said, it's an interesting process because like the genre spans so many people and so many different levels of like how much they're making from their book. Like if I was going to place a goal on like what I bring in for my book, it's to be able to pay for the editing and like the cover for the next one. You know, like I'm always like breaking even, hopefully. You know, like sometimes like my wife gets me editing for my birthday or something. I don't know. But yeah, so the whole process is I'll spend I would say the easiest part about writing fantasy is writing the initial draft. Like I think it's super fun. Like you're writing things that are like enjoyable to you. Like if you're like, that's not very fun, like your character's probably not going to do it, you know. And I liked how I write. There's a couple different methods to writing fantasy or fiction. One is to like storyboard your character out, like this is the like scene by scene. Okay. And like that's one method. The other method's called like gardening, where like you have your character, you plant them and you like prune them as they grow. And that's the way I
Mm,
like it. So like ultimately whenever I like storyboard mine, I'll like write out the hero's journey if I'm gonna do that route. And I'll be like, all right, here's these significant events that have to happen in this book to have continuity through like the flow of the book and like the story and to like to feel satisfied at the end of reading it. So then I have my characters and they'll just like I'll just write them. Like I don't know what they're gonna
mm,
say. And it's actually really hard. The hardest thing for me in writing is the dialogue coming from having gone through Bible school because everything is
mm.
like so at like higher education like and it's like people just don't talk like how we write, you know. So
Yeah.
like like for instance so I wrote a Christian thriller that I think I told you I'm gonna re-release, and it's like takes place in modern day Western Pennsylvania. And I'm like, what isms do we use? And like this one old lady in the books, like, you know, as long as the Lord's willing and the creeks don't rise. Like, nobody says that except in Western PA. But like yeah, it's just like for instance, like this is like if I would put that in a paper, you know, I'd get marks immediately. You would, yeah, you would mark that up, Marv, as a
Yeah.
professor. But yeah, you know, I'm just like, so anyhow, so you write the draft, you get through that. So then I usually let it sit for a month before I'll go back. And then I'll go back through and I'll read it and just like adjust things, edit a little bit, like do like the clear proofreading that needs done. And I usually do that like a chapter a night, or if I'm being diligent. If not, it gets spread out more than that. And then I would send it to like there's like a bunch of levels of editing in this like genre. I don't know about like nonfiction, but you have like a proofreader, you have a copy editor, you have just a normal editor, you have all these things. So for me, who's somebody that doesn't have a lot of money in this, is I found a copy editor that is willing to do most of that. And like I found copy editors just can't help themselves if they see like proofreading things. Like I was never great in English. Like I passed my classes just fine, but I often say the public education failed me in this area. You know, just like some of the things like that I write, and like I'm like, man, why did I write that? Like, what's the difference between the like? So there's just like proofreading things that need done. So anyhow, this goes to the copy editor. She brings it back to me. Um, and it's usually just marked up like crazy. She changes things, and like that's a fee that I do have to pay. It's the most expensive part of the whole thing. And then I will give that book. Actually, before that, I'll give the book to somebody to read for continuity, to look for plot holes. She'll give it back. Then I give it to. I have a friend who has also done a little bit of writing, but also like super knowledgeable in like grammatical and errors and all that stuff. And he like so he's also written a fantasy book too. So like he like reads the genre a lot, And like, so he'll pick up on things like, Wes, you use this word 5 times in this paragraph. I'm like, you know what? You're right. I need to get the thesaurus out and change some of these words around. So like he'll pick up on things like that. He'll pick up on things like if the copy editor missed anything that he'll point out to me. Um, he'll add some references, and then after that, I give it to somebody for a final read through, and then it's time for launch. But real quick before that, one of the ways I actually reward myself after writing the initial draft is I will go and shop for a cover for the book. So I've done covers a couple of different ways. One is like you can get pre-made covers, which is probably the best. It's the cheapest solution. So you can spend anywhere from like $75 to like $150 to get like a really great cover. Like both of my covers were within that range, and like the artwork's great on them. I had like of the other book I wrote, the thriller that I'm gonna republish it. Just because it's like many people have said like it's the best book I've written, but at the same time I just did a bad job marketing it whenever it came out. David Hardy did the cover on that one, which is super cool, honestly. So yeah. And I love the cover on that one. It's one of my favorite covers. And then so that's kind of where I'm at in terms of that whole process. Does that kind of run through it for you? Or?
Yeah, no. That's great. And David Hardy has done a lot of work for me, and he's great. You're gonna have to send me that cover because I'd love to see what he did for you. I guess my final question for this interview is how did you publish it, and how do you plan on publishing the next? I mean, you went through a whole list of people who help you edit it, which is similar but also a little bit more rigorous, it sounds like, than fiction or nonfiction writing. So how did you publish it, and how do you plan on publishing the next one?
Yeah, I often refer to like Amazon as my overlord because they just control everything for me in that capacity. So I've just decided like I had a couple options in terms of how do I want to pursue like move forward with this book, and it's like a lot of it came down to what's my motivation in it, or like what am I looking to accomplish with it. So like for fiction writers, often what you do is you can shop the smaller publishing houses whenever they're open for submissions, which they're not open for submissions very often. And like ground level, like if you're going to get in. So and then even then there's like a bunch of them, but also because they're small, they don't have the bandwidth as the bigger like Penguin or Random, like Penguin would have. Like they don't have like the distribution. What you're essentially doing for them is you're saying, hey, I'll let you guys publish my book. You're going to take a cut and you can use your marketing platform. So really, if they have a really big Facebook following of readers who buy, like that's like one of the ways, like this is how we're benefiting you. Some of them will provide like cover art and editing services. But like all of that, like once again, like comes with a cost. And then you have like the medium to like larger sizes where you can actually like you will pay an agent to shop your work to them. And that's like once again, like that was something where it's just like the submission time frame. So like in some instances, they'll say if you submit your work to us, you can't submit it to another publisher for until we get back to you. And that can be like 6 months or something. At that point, like I was so excited for my first book. I'm like, I just want to get this out there, see if anybody wants to read it. So I just published through Amazon. I went independent publishing. So like there's a couple. So there's like traditional publishing is what I just described to you. There's independent publishing where you're going to do it all yourself, and like Amazon gives you the resources to do that, and they take their cut. Or else you can self-publish and pay like a self-publishing firm, and you'll submit it to them. They'll do all the stuff. You'll end up paying probably a couple $1,000s for them to publish your book for you. So like I said, I went just the route. I found like a 1, 2, 3, do these things and publish through Amazon. So I was like, that's what I did. And like I said, my goal was for people to read the book. That's really like the greatest joy that comes from like writing for me. Like once I have the book out there, and like once I decide like I'm actually going to finish the book or write the story, like is that it actually gets into people's hands and that they enjoy it and it's like beneficial to them. So for me, the downside is you can't do like, so we'll do pre-orders on Amazon for the upcoming book release, and it'll have yeah, like you just can't do a hardcover. You can only do the ebooks, which is a way like Amazon like keeps people reading Kindle versions, and
Mhm.
so we'll like do like I'll do like a separate pre-order list for people who want like signed copies and things like that. But yeah, so we'll do all those things. And yeah, so like that's kind of the plan. Like I'll buy a couple boxes of author copies and sign them and send them to people, whoever wants those. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds a lot like regular, the same process for nonfiction writing. Getting in the door is the toughest process. So, yeah, well, I'm looking forward to seeing the next book on Amazon. I'm going to definitely purchase that. When will that be available for either pre-order or regular order?
All right. So let me pull my calendar here. All right. So February 2nd is the day that it's going to go live. So the paperbacks and the ebooks will come out that day, and it'll be available for pre-order next week. And we are December 7th. So it'll be available for pre-order before this podcast comes out.
Yeah, so when you're watching this Alliance Writers Collective, you could go immediately to Amazon and look up W. Sherry, not West Sherry.
Yeah.
He put that in there. I think probably because it's unique rather than West Sherry. There's lots of West Sherrys I found on Amazon, so I think that was a good call. But we just are appreciative of your time. We thank you for giving us a different, fresh look on Alliance Writers Collective. You
Yeah.
are a CMA author and you are doing something different, and we appreciate that from you, and look forward to writing more. Look forward to hearing you write more things, and that fiction book that you talked about, the thriller. We look forward to seeing when that will come out as well. So check out West Sherry, W. Sherry on Amazon.com. Pick up your copy of the Hero of the Fallen, and then the next book, The Ascension of the Fallen, is going to
Yep.
be coming out, and you can grab your copy. So, yeah, again, thanks, Wes, and I look forward to seeing more writing. So, thanks.
All right. Thanks, Marv.